Our headline stories: reviving the Tema Oil Refinery and the economic prospects of the Lamu Port. And there are some serious economic activities going on across the continent, but this comes with overcoming the infrastructural challenges and deficits of the past. It also means preparing for the future. Today, we'll focus on two projects that have the potential to impact their country's economies in incredible ways. I'm Tolulope Adeleru Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. Now, joining me on today's show is Nnamdi Nwizu. He's the co-managing partner of Commercio Partners. So, Nnamdi, first on our agenda today is the Tema Oil Refinery. So here's a quick background on the conversation. So Ghana's current government, through its ministries of energy and finance, has supported the Tema Oil Refinery to replace its burnt furnace. This means it will now be able to process more crude oil for both local and international markets. The installation of a new furnace had already started earlier this year and is expected to be completed soon to allow for deployment in the fourth quarter of 2021. The refinery said that the replacement allows it to produce, according to its installed capacity of 45,000 barrels of crude oil per stream day. So Ghana's government has apparently been paying off part of its $400 million debt, such as the payment of 1 billion Ghana cedis debt that accrued between 2009 and 2016, and another $167 million of the debt in the same period. The refinery is in discussion with the Ghana Water Company Limited and other creditors to agree payment plans for settlement of legacy debts. So, Nnamdi, I want to start with that. This story is really nothing new, that aspect of it in terms of debts in a state-owned entity. We've seen many state-owned entities across the continent unable to pay their debts, unable to really make the revenue they need to stay alive and then also live up to expectations. We see this across the continents, from Nigeria to Ghana to South Africa to Kenya. From a business standpoint, why do you think this is so common in Africa?
Well, I would say that down to two things. One would be a bit of mismanagement that we see across most African countries. And the second would have to do a lot with politics. A lot of governments tend to look for ways to appease their people and appease the populace and electorate. And what they do is they more or less end up, giving out contracts, running favors and all sorts of things, and being very professional. Some people look at it as their rights. So if you look at Nigeria, for instance, and considering the fact that we still refuse to fully remove fuel subsidy. Why? Because it's being used as a means to appease the people, which definitely means that the petroleum sector won't be running at NNPC won't be working optimally. So basically, it's a trend that you see across a lot of African countries.
So now drilling down to the Tema Oil Refinery, they have debts in excess of about $400 million. A large chunk of this is legacy debt. So where is all of this debt coming from? Particularly in terms of its inability to even repay. Why hasn't it been able to repay its own debts? Nnamdi, are you still with me?
Hello?
Okay,
so
yes.
Ghana took over the refinery from ENI of Italy, I think back about 1977. And after that, we've seen the Ghanaian government try their best to try and support the refinery. We've seen them make some payments. The government paid, I think, about $216 million to TRO's main creditor, which is the Ghana Commercial Bank, in 2010, trying to clear about half of the refinery debt at that time. But the debt continues to increase. So basically what we're facing now is a situation or scenario whereby the government keeps trying to intervene, but the debt keeps on increasing. Naturally, they've not been able to pay it off totally, but we see the government trying to do their own parts, but they've faced basically quite a bit of challenges trying to do that.
So while there are debts, we're also seeing, as you said, that the government is also trying to do its own part. The refinery has also still been in production. Maybe it hasn't been living up to expectation, but about 25,000 barrels per day has been coming out. Were there no plans for repayment aside from government having to step in to assist the refinery to repay its legacy debts and other debts as well?
Well, if you consider the fact that the plant has been operating at roughly about 2/3 of its capacity, ideally its capacity is supposed to be 45,000 barrels per day. But after they had some incidents some time back that burned one of the furnaces, they basically, I think the furnace exploded sometime in January 2017. We've basically gone through a process whereby they've struggled to meet their financial obligation. And because you have a heavy debt burden, legacy debt burden, it's also difficult for them to secure crude for its operation because no one wants to give you crude on credit because they know you're struggling to pay, or struggling to meet your payments as and when due. So it's a bit like, it's something, an albatross hanging on them. They're producing at less than they should be with regards to having one furnace that exploded in 2017. The heavy debt is slowing them down from being able to get crude to even optimally operate in 25,000 barrels per day. So I think both of those things are working towards naturally slowing them down. And naturally, like I said, a lot of African countries have quite a bit of mismanagement.
So leaving aside the fact that there has been some issues with oil, with crude selling on the international market because of the pandemic as well. Some would say Ghana has something going for it, and that's because the country is not a member of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. So she's not really bound by production quotas and cuts and things like that. Is there any way for Ghana to take advantage of this, especially when the furnace is fully installed and production is back and capacity is at 100%? So talking about Ghana taking advantage of not being part of OPEC, what were you saying there?
Yeah, so I was saying that they've grown from 1,400 barrels per day to 214,000 barrels. They've been able to grow their production how many folds. But, there's also the flip side, because if you're not part of OPEC, then it means OPEC members can also target your clients because naturally they're trying not to eat into each other's sort of like client base and all of that. So, but we've seen them move up aggressively and it's yet to see how much more they can go up. Naturally, it depends on how much they have in terms of reserves and all of that to allow them to produce a lot more.
All right. So finally, on the Tema Oil Refinery, the new furnace is expected to be fully installed and production should be started by the fourth quarter of 2021. And with the refinery hitting full production capacity, what do you expect to happen? We've seen a lot of interesting things coming out of the Nana Akufo-Addo administration in Ghana. They've been positioning with tourism, positioning in regards to their oil capacity as well, investments as well. They've gotten a lot of foreign direct investment coming in. They really were the stellar star for the continent, even with the coronavirus in 2021 in terms of FDI. But now this is going to also add to the revenue for the country. What do you expect to happen next?
Well, if this goes well, if it goes according to plan, then this should have an overall multiplier effect impact on the economy. Revenues will increase. Then Ghana, not only being an oil producing, would naturally be an oil refining nation. And if they get to meet their full capacity, then you can even talk about exporting refined products. So people like Nigeria are still trying to sort out their own refinery issues, might even end up importing from Ghana, depending on, how much refined products they themselves need. So definitely it would ease energy costs, help their GDP to strengthen. And definitely will be a big win for Ghana if they're able to achieve this and it goes according to plan.
Okay, so we're looking at a net multiplier effect for the Tema Oil Refinery if everything goes according to plan. But we typically know in these situations, timelines can be stated, but then timelines can change. Do you think they'll be able to get everything back up and running as expected by the end of the year? Okay, some connection.
All the effects, knock-on effects that we had from COVID, we've had shortage of materials all over the world, the whole value chain has been affected. So I definitely won't be surprised if you see them stretching into 2022, just based on the fact that you've had a COVID-ravaged world, economies and supply chains and all of that have been affected. I won't be surprised if you stretch it into the next year.
All right, we'll be keeping our eye on our neighbor in West Africa to see how they're faring regarding that. So Nnamdi, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back on Business Edge, we head to the eastern part of the continent where a massive multi-million-dollar project has finally kicked off and the implications and the possibilities, as many would say, are boundless. We'll be talking about the Lamu Port project in Kenya after this. And next on our Business Edge agenda is the economic prospects of the Lamu Port in Kenya. Now, the port is already in operation. 80 tons of avocados already deported the Lamu Port for France. They were loaded onto one of the first ever cargo ships to berth at the entry point of the Lamu Point, South Sudan, Ethiopia transport corridor. The ports will pave way for seamless movement of goods in the Greater Horn of Africa region. This first phase of the Lamu Port project consists of 3 berths constructed by the China Communications Construction Company. The Lamu Port is a Vision 2030 flagship project for Kenya. Nnamdi Nwizu is still with me as we take a look at this. So this port project has been a long time coming. And when you look at the prospects and opportunities it opens up, Nnamdi, what do you see happening with this project basically coming on board now?
Well, we know that this is a massive project, basically involves Kenya, Ethiopia, South Sudan. It's a massive one, it's a huge one. If they get to do it, then definitely would see trade improve. It would help with it would help ease pressures on Kenya's port. It will also help South Sudan, with regards to their own movement of oil from help them with their pipeline oil transportation. So it will be a massive one. It's a big project. Naturally, they've had a lot of hiccups down the line. And we'd like to see how this finally plays out. But I'm glad to see African countries coming together to work on a project of this size.
And that was where my next question was actually going. So as you said, Kenya, Ethiopia, South Sudan are involved in this. It's 2021, the 21st century, but there have been many other opportunities for African countries, particularly on a regional basis, to collaborate to something of this extent. And we don't see it so much. We are seeing movements now. The new bridge that opened as well just about 2 or 3 weeks ago is one of those kind of projects. But on the flip side of it, this would have opened up trade, business, commerce, so many opportunities. Why does it take Africa so long to seemingly do what should have been done probably even a decade, if not more, ago?
I think it all boils down to good governance. We've seen it, a number of African countries, they have sit-tight rulers. You have a lot of presidents who are really not concerned about really trying to improve their economies, but instead they focus more on what they can do for themselves and for their own people and for their, political stalwarts and co. So it's a huge problem generally across Africa. We spoke about that earlier on when we were talking about Ghana. And it boils down to not having the right kind of people in leadership.
So let's talk about more on the project. So the massive project for the countries, it will connect, as we said earlier, it opens up the Lamu Port, South Sudan, Ethiopia transport corridor, and it's the kind of regional integration that Africa has been looking for. But Kenya has seemingly carried the cost of this project. Now, Lamu was created to also ease congestion at the Mombasa port as well. And all of this comes to around maybe some $367 million, definitely more because of delays and things like that. But in terms of Ghana really being the one that foots the bill to drive this, you don't think this is too much of a cost or possibly maybe a burden for Kenya to bear?
We'd like to look at it from the finance side. So total estimated investment in the project is about $5 billion from what I hear. And the government of Kenya so far has financed about the first 3 berths or so of the ports. And basically the short-term plan is to spend about $689 million or so. But then after that, they're going to try and get money from the private sector. So they're going to have like public-private partnerships to try and raise remaining funds required for the project. But if you're looking at it from huge costs, you also have to look at it from the benefits. So the port will create direct employment for local communities, then also indirect jobs in things like fishery, manufacturing, logistics, transport. It's huge for the government. Then it'll also be capable of accommodating large cargo ships, which will reduce congestion at the Mombasa, the Djibouti, and Sudan ports, and improve trade and logistics for Ethiopia, Kenya, and South Sudan. So the benefits are huge. So whilst I agree that the costs are pretty high, I'm glad to see the government is planning to do some sort of public-private partnership to help with the financing. But the benefits far outweigh the costs if, once again, it's done the right way it should be done. You don't have inflated budgets and money spent in the proper manner, and you have accountability, then definitely you have the benefits outstripping whatever costs we're worried about.
Okay. We're all having fingers crossed, I think toes crossed, elbows crossed, everything, because I think Africa would also like to see a project that really lives up to expectations, maybe doesn't necessarily come in on budget on time, as we know these things happen, but really does live up to the expectations of those who put it out. So Nnamdi, you mentioned the Africa Continental Free Trade Area at the beginning of this conversation about the port. So let's look at that a little bit more. How do you think the Lamu Port really plays into that and helps AfTA sort of really come into being?
Well, it would reduce transportation costs and haulage of goods, and we know that that's something that AfTA is trying to really work on. Movement of goods, commuters from across different African countries. So if you look at the roadworks connecting Lamu to Nairobi via Garissa, they're well underway, and then the new Lamu-Gassi road has reduced transport costs significantly. So typically, truckers and travelers would need to go, via Mombasa, but now their journey gets cut down significantly. And definitely this is the kind of thing that people would like to see around AfTA, and that's what AfTA represents. So moving goods around African continents and the African continent and the various countries, and ensuring that you can do that at the, least possible cost. And the same thing also goes for commuters too.
When you look at a project like this, where else do you think on the continent we should be looking to see this kind of regional collaboration, regional economically beneficial project as well?
I think you can look at the various regions. You can look at West Africa and start to look at from Nigeria all the way down to Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire. Why can't we have, roads and ports and all sorts of things that stretch it basically across, all those continents and makes transportation, so much easier. So, hey, why not? Why do we always have to fly down from here to Ghana and Co. or other West African coast countries? So I definitely think that is something that we can look at in that region, for starters. Then if you go to North Africa, where you have Algeria, Egypt, Algeria and Co., Morocco and Co., nothing stops them from also coming together to ensure they're able to achieve, something similar for this.
All right. So finally on this, we're seeing and hearing that Kenya has some interest in allocating some special funds for countries near and along the Lamu Port corridor. What's the idea behind this? What would these special funds accomplish?
So they're for the countries across. So naturally, when you have construction of the ports, you definitely tend to affect a lot of counties, villages, and co. Right. So things like land rights will be affected. You might have some environmental degradation. Some people will lose their means of livelihoods. So basically, raising a large range of concerns. So different rights groups, have documented various complaints by residents about compulsory land acquisition by the government, and also complain about, loss of means of livelihood. So the government of Kenya has allocated, I think, about $50 million or thereabout to compensate the affected landowners. You've seen similar things happen all over the world. You've seen it happen even in Lagos when you did this stretch from Badagry down to Marina and having to compensate people. So it is a norm, and it happens all over the world.
All right, so best global practice coming in. I think a lot of people would be happy to see that on the continent. Nnamdi Nwizu, again, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me on Business Edge.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We'll see you next time. And before we wrap things up, let's give you a few stories we're keeping our eyes on. This is NC4 to watch. A new report by PwC Nigeria has highlighted the need for the petroleum industry bill to provide a clear plan for a gradual transition to renewable energy in the country. The report noted the pivotal role of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation in accelerating the transition to renewable energy, and that cannot be overemphasized. The Central Bank of Kenya has maintained the benchmark rate of 7% for the 8th consecutive time during the latest Monetary Policy Committee meeting. The committee said that leading economic indicators show a strong economic recovery in the first quarter of the year. Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa has announced penalties for companies and individuals to prevent what his government has described as profiteering from the selling of hard currency that it makes available at auctions. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe will fine companies and even individuals if foreign currency that they obtained directly or indirectly from the weekly auction or from banks is used for purposes other than that what it is specified for. And according to Forbes Middle East, Morocco is expected to emerge as the 5th strongest African economy in 2021. Forbes used the most recent gross domestic product data that the International Monetary Fund made public to assess the economic outlook for Africa in 2021. Morocco's GDP is projected to be 1.1 trillion Moroccan dinar, or about $124 billion this year. And that's it on this edition of Business Edge. Follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can also head to our website and download our mobile app on your Play Store and App Store. Until next time, I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun.